Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, Sol Smith, who's here to share with us his new book, The Autistic's Guide to Self-Discovery, Flourishing as a Neurodivergent Adult. What if the version of yourself that you've spent years trying to fix just to blend in was never broken to begin with? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Sol Smith is an author and the manager of the Neurospicy community, which is the largest support network for autistic and ADHDers in the world. He's a certified autism specialist who is autistic, dyslexic, and living with ADHD. He spent more than 2 decades as a college professor before shifting his professional focus to coaching other autistic and ADHD people to gain autonomy in their lives. Sol's speaking skills have earned him a following of hundreds of thousands on TikTok and led to educational seminars about neurodiversity with corporations around the world. So welcome to the show, Sol Smith.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this new book. What inspired you to write this?
Man, trying to get to the salient point of that is that when you recognize that you're autistic or you're diagnosed as autistic as an adult, that there really is no guidebook. There's no pathway. There's no ways of really working with people that help them to acclimate to this reality. And it's a really shocking reality, and I feel like it's not taken seriously enough by a lot of people. Just for example, late diagnosed autistics tend to be the most underemployed group of people, the most underpaid group of people when compared to their education, and the most at risk for suicide of any group in the world. And so it really is a group that's in crisis, and yet there's no sort of safety net or treatment or anything like that going on there. We just have to sort of jump in the deep end and swim. To have a sense of a roadmap, a sense of this is how you can get from this understanding or from burnout into a place where you can change enough to really self-manage and not be dealing with so many of the problems that have been haunting you a lot of your life.
So are there more people now that are becoming late diagnosed autistic? Is that something that's happening?
Well, yeah. People who are over 18 right now, about 80% of the autistics who are over 18 have not been diagnosed. We didn't have the same vocabulary for it as we do now. We didn't have the same, when we were younger, the MRI machine hadn't even been invented. And what we knew about autism was really shallow compared to what we know now. So a lot of people who've dealt with this in their life didn't have a name for it, didn't have a name for your difference, didn't have a name for the way that you thought or the way that your nervous system experiences the world. And we're seeing this shift of people coming to this realization. And it's really a one-time shift, we hope. We hope that it's something where the younger generation, being armed with this knowledge and having, the right kind of supports and system, may be able to identify earlier than a lot of us. So yeah, there is an influx of it right now, and it's really based on this broader understanding. And a lot of it comes from the pandemic, too. The fact that many people were out of the public eye, that they were out of, the office, that they spent a lot of time either in isolation or at home, it helped us to see all the ways that we're just burning energy by masking and by tolerating environments that are really extreme, really harsh on the autistic nervous system. So a lot of us, when everybody wanted to go back to normal, we're like, what? I thought we hated that. I thought everybody couldn't stand that. We really want to go back to normal? This is terrible. And it really brought a lot of our issues to light in very personal ways.
In your book, you share your experience of feeling like an imposter. How did that realization shape your self-discovery?
Yeah, I felt like an imposter a lot of my life. I mean, the way that I did my work when I was a kid in school was always different than how I was told to do it. And I always felt like, at some point, this way that I'm not following instructions, the way that I'm working around things instead of following the steps that were being taught, that at some point this would kind of be found out, and then I realized that the ultimate product was okay, and it wasn't going to be discovered that I wasn't following directions. And this kind of continued into when I was teaching. That as a college professor, I was about 5 years into my career. I started a doctorate of education degree, and one of the first things I read about the profession of education in that degree plan was that most teachers feel a sense of imposter syndrome for about 5 years. And I remember just feeling like, oh my gosh, like relief washed over me like a wave that maybe this was going to go away now that it's been 5 years. And it just never did, like at all. And it's one of those things where the way that I think isn't really fit for the way that most people teach. And it's not really fit for the way that teaching is treated as an institution, with a focus on efficiency and measuring outcomes. Because the way that I see things is that learning isn't efficient. And if you're measuring outcomes, you're not really teaching. And this is sort of compiled, professionally, with the sense of being an imposter, even in social groups, where I feel like I'm always trying to watch everybody to fit in, trying to sort of, match the vibe, and that it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be masking in social situations that are supposed to be relaxing or fun, and so this really ends up weighing on you, especially as you get older and your working memory declines around 40, and you realize you can't keep as many plates in the air all of a sudden, and you've been maxing yourself out. You've been maxing your working memory out through masking. And, masking is essentially just being an imposter to even yourself, trying to be what other people expect you to be rather than listening to some sort of internal drives. So yeah, comes a point where I was like, this just cannot be what everybody else's experience is. This can't be how everybody's living their lives. Because I feel like we would be in like a meeting and I could just say, hey, is anybody here like really feel like this is what we should be doing? Or all of us just feel like a bunch of people like in a play. And it just seemed like everybody would go, yeah, it's like being in a play. But it turned out, for the most part, it was just me feeling that way.
I would be kind of curious to see how many other adults are feeling that they're in that neurodivergent category that maybe have
hmm
gone and never been diagnosed.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably really, I don't want to say it's more common than you think, but I think within certain groups it is. Um, in the book ADHD 2.0, which is a really excellent book about ADHD, the doctors who wrote that actually had a hand in writing the DSM criteria, and they say that by their estimation that about 25% of people have enough ADHD traits that treating it like ADHD would really benefit their lives. And that's a pretty huge percentage, 25%. Like we think that ADHD is about 11% overall, and that might be the diagnosable level, but there are traits that seep in and can be part of anybody's life. So same with autism. Autism, we think right now is between 4 and 5% of people, and there's just a lot of guesswork about if it's more than that, if it's less than that. And I try not to speculate too much, but we do know that our diagnostic capabilities have been historically way off. Just for example, the CDC on their website, they still have the statistic that says that boys are 4 times as likely to be autistic as girls. And it's really absurd. It's just basically it's easier to diagnose boys because the diagnostic criteria and our understanding of autism was built around observing white boys, and they tend to be socialized in different ways than the rest of the population. Um, being a sort of like patriarchal society that has its roots in, colonization, white men are the least socialized people. Like they get the excuse of boys will be boys and that kind of stuff. So when you're autistic, you don't socialize into your role. And it's really obvious with basically that demographic. It's not as obvious with girls, for example, because they're more heavily socialized, and they're socialized to be um, caretakers and emotionally aware and available. And that's much deeper type of training that they undergo just latently. So when a girl begins to show signs of autism, it can look like they're a tomboy. It can look like they have a more male centric styles of play and communication, and it's just simply because they're, despite all the efforts of socializing, they just haven't quite gotten there. So they really have to drift all the way through that sort of like male area of socialization before they stick out as autistic, and so that can be missed a lot of the time just through that. So we do know that a lot of our criteria has been off, and that there's no reason to suspect that autism is more genetically common in boys than girls. So we imagine that there's a huge population of undiagnosed women out there, for example.
I think a lot of women are going, I think I fall in that category. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things where, a lot of people, when they start finding out, they think, well, no, they learn about the traits and they say, well, everybody's doing this. And they look at maybe their friends group or their family or their network and think a lot of people are having these same sort of experiences. And it's because, we tend to find each other. We tend to socialize with each other because of our shared experiences growing up, and because of our shared sort of isolation, alienation. A lot of the people in our groups do end up being in the same sort of like neurotype. And within families, of course, it's like very common that it's genetically there, and that many people in your family might be autistic, and you think, oh, well, this is just how everybody is, but most people are better at struggling through. Most people are better at organization or cleaning up, and that, just even these like daily tasks of life that can be really hard when your executive function is low. You can get this message that it's just that you are deficient and everybody else is just really good at this. Um, so it sort of eliminates this idea of it being something like autism or ADHD, because you just assume that the deficiency is on your part and that it's never going to change. But when you recognize it and see that, oh, all of these things that add up to many of the challenges I'm having, yeah, that they look like autism, there's something of a relief there. There's something of it doesn't forgive everything, because you still have to manage in this world. But there is a sort of relief that you're being held to a standard that really wasn't made with you in mind. And you've got to make changes in your life to have a more satisfying way of living. So, yeah, I think there probably are a lot of people who are seeing that, and hopefully can start tracking those differences, especially from the experience side. Just since so much of what we hear about autism is told from the outside through diagnostic criteria, that's outward symptoms. We don't show outward symptoms when we're late diagnosed. Like, we've been hiding them very well, even from ourselves. So when you start seeing the experience of other autistic people and you start reading about their realizations and their journeys, it can sound a lot like yours. And that begins to really break through better than what we've been hearing all of these years.
How would you define autism?
Yeah, it's tough to have a zippy sort of definition, but essentially, autistics have a different nervous system. And I think that the best way that I've found to explain it, and I was explaining it this way well before I knew I was autistic, is that our filters are different. We used to think, years and years ago, that the brain was using most of its energy to take in the outside world and translate it for us. But it turns out that most of the energy in your brain is being used to filter things out. That there's so much stimuli, there's so much information around you coming in through your all of your senses, that what your brain is doing is sifting through this and creating a way for you to focus on only the important aspects, all the important stuff. So you have this sort of like, laser sharp radar system that brings in the world and makes it functional. And autistics don't have the same filters. So instead of being unaware of the way your clothes feel, for example, it can become really irritating if it's made with the wrong fabric, if it's scratchy, if it's not fitting. Um, Background noises and background music can be too much because we don't turn that volume down in our brain, and it becomes sort of a miasma with people who are talking to us. In really extreme examples, you might be so fascinated with the pattern on the carpet that there's nothing in your brain telling you that the carpet pattern is not as important as the discussion you're having. And so you kind of have to pilot it much in a much more difficult way. It's like being, a person trying to steer an elephant, and the elephant wants to look at the pattern on the carpet, but you know that it needs to come over here and listen to the conversation you're having. And it just means a lot of executive function being used to manage a world without filters. And like I said, that's not a very zippy definition when it comes down to it. But I think that's probably the best way of explaining the experience. Um, and there's intense world theory of autism that basically our world ends up being more intense because of all of the stimuli. So it takes a lot more energy to manage.
And here I was thinking it could be the conversation's not as important as the carpet, you know?
It's possible. It depends. Right.
Oh my goodness. Well, and in your book, you describe, the brain as having these modules that
hmm
don't play nice with one another. Can you expand on that for us?
Yeah, it's our brains developed over, just millennia, and they developed different parts for different eras in our world. So for example, we know that what all animals evolved from, their central nervous system would have been really primitive, obviously, and basically just reactive to the outside world. And that part of our brain is still in there. And sometimes it's called your lizard brain or your caveman brain or something like that. It's this brain stem that we have that deals with fear, that deals with reacting to the outside world, that deals with our different impulses and drives. And it's sort of the groundwork of the brain that is still very much alive, but on top of it is built this much more advanced thinking brain that was made for different aspects of our evolutionary history. In the newest part, the prefrontal cortex, where we do most of our thinking, makes a lot of sense of the world and tells us that we're completely rational people walking around. But sometimes our amygdala deep in our lizard brain can be triggered, and our thinking brain will interpret this in some sort of logical way, and it's may not be the case. Like, just for example, it can be really easy to manipulate people's points of view if you can convince them that there is some sort of danger, there is some sort of like threat happening, and that you have the sort of solution to this. So creating an anxiety in that base part of your brain, and then offering your thinking brain this idea that you can solve it, can end up really persuading people to listen to you. Advertising does this all the time. Politicians do this all the time. Come up with some sort of a boogeyman that's causing your problems, and it speaks to that real fear center of your brain that's looking for a rationale for a sense of threat that it may have. Um, yeah, so it's just, yeah, basically all these different parts that need to work together so that one doesn't overpower the other one. If you have way too much sensory information, way too much going on, this can essentially make that base part of the brain react in a way that's like a meltdown, where it's just emotions spilling out and a loss of control because you're no longer working through your prefrontal cortex. You're really working from this base part of your existence. And we like to stay regulated, which means having enough cognitive energy to stay in that driver's seat up in the prefrontal cortex. It's kind of like a director or a conductor coming out and cueing the different parts of the brain to do different things throughout the day. And if you have a really reactive brain, it's very hard to take control of that orchestra.
What are some of the misconceptions that you hope this book clears up?
I hope it clears up the idea that, for one, that autism is a trend, that it's being overdiagnosed. We know for a fact that it's actually very underdiagnosed, and that we have it. It's an inherent part of who we are. So I hope to really reduce a lot of the stigma about autism. I recognize that it's been part of me that has caused lots of job loss, lots of insecurity, lots of trials with just managing a family and managing money that are a little out of I don't want to say it's out of my cognitive ability, but that because of the way I'm communicating, because of the way I interact with people, that it's much harder to manage all of these like work relationships, and it can come off in weird ways. So essentially, even though I recognize all of that, I also recognize the different ways that I think that are autistic, the ways that I do bottom up thinking and a lot of lateral thinking that's different than the just critical thinking and top down thinking that a neurotypical may do. And that I wouldn't trade it. I really like the autistic traits that I have. I really like this intense world that I live in. I just want to make it where we can live in it and take part in it without facing massive challenges of unemployment, of isolation, of loneliness, and of just feeling like we're not enough. And of course, in our political climate right now, it's important that we reduce that stigma and stop having this sense of like morality attached to it or deficiency attached to it. So yeah, we're a little bit less fit for capitalism than a neurotypical is, but that doesn't make us less valuable as a person. And in fact, it means we just need to create different adaptations. And education would help a lot of that. If everybody were more educated about it, there'd be a lot more understanding of the fact that not everybody's wired the same way.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, we're all so very different, and to have a book that helps people navigate that, I think that's
Right.
such a blessing.
Yeah, and then, and obviously nobody likes to necessarily have really stressful 8-hour work days or anything. But I think that it's the kind of thing that a neurotypical brain is more adept at adjusting to, that it is more adept at regulating, co-regulating with coworkers, feeling understood by each other and feeling a sense of camaraderie with each other that doesn't happen as much with the autistic brain. And that we feel uh, a sense of overwhelm in managing, really long work days or really stressful things like that. And we don't tend to make as many friendships because it's really strange what role we're playing there. Are we coworkers? Are we friends? And just basically a lot of it just doesn't fit the optimal way for us to be, not over aroused, not under aroused, and be in that window of tolerance where everything's okay. It's much narrower. So we have to make changes either in accommodations in the workplace or changing jobs or working for yourself. And of course, these things are hard. They're really hard, especially to do when you're older.
Well, then you get into some of the issues of increased isolation for people who are self-employed. I mean, that can
Right.
happen quite a bit.
Oh no, definitely. And a lot of autistics have a sort of um, social phobia of sorts. It's to different degrees, where a history of feeling a little out of place and of struggling with building friendships will, yeah, that they'll withdraw, especially if they're not exposed to it a lot. And having positive social interactions is really, really good for you. It's good for your brain. It reduces the chance of dementia when you're older. I mean, it's very powerful stuff. And so when we do pull back and we get this sense of like, well, maybe I don't need anyone, it may feel satisfying for a while, but ultimately it's not good for you. Ultimately, it's not good for your happiness. And you reinforce the idea that you don't socialize to yourself. You reinforce that so you never take the plunge and you never try things out. So I recommend to people that, trying to find something around your interests, trying to find something that you can go to, maybe a group that meets and talks about things, or a convention or something, and that you try these things out 3 times, because you've got to expect that there's enough anxiety that the first 2 times are not going to feel super comfortable. You're managing a lot of like novelty and a lot of new inputs. So the third time, the familiarity is there. There's a little bit of a groundwork. And finally, you can sort of see, am I enjoying this? Do I like this? Are there people I connect with? Instead of just trying to observe and understand the situation that generally happens when it begins. And you can interpret that as like, wow, that was overwhelming. I don't like it. But it's just an adjustment, and transitions are hard. So I'd really try to encourage people to put yourself out there, whether you're working for yourself or not, to put yourself out there and try some things out. And it can go against the whole comfort zone, but it's worth it.
What would you like readers and our listeners to take away from your book?
I had a really a sort of realization about what I did with this book that was different than some of the other books about autism out there. And it came through a reader who wrote a review and said that this book is like a love letter to autism. And I thought, yeah, like it's pretty positive. I feel like it's a look at it that's affirming and presents a lot of hope. And that a lot of other autistic books, a lot of readers I've talked to have said that they've read books on autism, and sometimes they can't even get through them because they're so depressing. That they use case studies and examples that are really difficult to read, because they emphasize a lot of the challenges and ways that we're that discriminated against, and all of that's very important. It's important to understand that. And I don't think that my book is toxically positive, where it's basically says, don't worry, you're going to be fine, just think and believe, and and everything will turn out. But instead it's saying there are a lot of positives here, and let's not overlook them. Because if we can build on our strengths and look at our strengths and see what we like about this, then it's much better than worrying about, oh, there's all these problems that I have, let me work on those problems. Working on weaknesses is not always the best answer. It's much better to work on the things that you're good at and capitalize on that, and eventually build networks where you can have other people who help you in those areas where you're weak. And that way you're not focusing on all of the ways that you feel like you're not good enough. So I would say that, yeah, what I want people to sort of take away from it is that this is a positive look at this neurotype, and it's a positive look at how your life can change when you understand yourself better.
Well, Soul, you're such an inspiration. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your book?
Yeah, home base is professorsoul.com, and that's, just professor, and then soul is SOL, like the sun, .com. And everything's kind of there. That's where I do coaching, one-on-one coaching with clients, and it's where I also do seminars for workplaces that want to make a more neurodivergent friendly workspace. And I also have an online community at neurospicycommunity.com. And this is where autistics all around the world have come together. We have message boards that are really active every day, online courses that educate you about autism and about ADHD and about the challenges and expectations. And then we have support group meetings. Right now there's 12 support group meetings, and we're expanding. And it's everybody in the community that has unlimited access to all of this. And it does cost money. It's $25 a month right now, and it's basically that keeps the wheels on the car. But it has really been a beneficial place for so many of us to feel a little bit less alone.
Well, Soul, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Soul. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Autistic's Guide to Self-Discovery, Flourishing as a Neurodivergent Adult. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.